Hello, I'm Elgato, and if you don't already know, 2019 is going to be the year that Minecraft changes its visual appearance entirely. Pretty much every single block will be receiving some form of update in the next year or so, and although these will be happening at slightly different times for each platform, you will see a huge texture update at some point in the next year for Java Edition, Bedrock Edition, and Console Edition. And I figured now that we have actually launched some of this on Bedrock, the first texture update is actually here, and it has most of the new text changes. I figured I'd use an actual live survival world rather than just individual blocks, because I think, comparing individual block textures is nice, but Minecraft is a game of lots of blocks together, so let's check out a real live survival world and let's see the actual differences side by side of the new Minecraft textures versus the old ones and see what's improved and what might not have improved. And that's what we're doing in today's video, which I hope you all do enjoy. You can like this if you do like it, but let's dive straight into the comparisons, shall we? Because I want to mention a few things here. Not every block has been updated yet. Most of them will be updated at some point in the future, and although we've seen most of them here, and some of them aren't quite so noticeable, we'll be talking about mostly the notable ones, because although stuff like item frames have changed, you probably won't notice it if you've got an item in there. Again, most people haven't spotted this one, for instance, but every block has changed a little bit, and together these things can add up, such as when you look at the living room right here, where it's like, oh yeah, so this living room, again, it's small, subtle changes, but when you see the furnace looks different, when you see the brewing stands look different, when you see all these things start to add up, it's like, oh, Minecraft has changed entirely. So I guess we should first of all address what we kind of walk around and show just some of the basic nature. Why is this being done? Why is the entire look of the game changing? You might like it how it is currently. However, Minecraft is a game which has been built kind of piece by piece over almost 9 years now. Basically, over all these years, different artists have made different textures, and this means that there's a slightly inconsistent look across Minecraft because it's made by so many different people across so many points in time. So there's been an attempt by a single pixel artist to kind of unify all those designs together. So they hired Jasper, who is a pixel artist, to make every single texture, and now they're going to have a consistent theme. It's not that the theme is better or worse than it was before, it's just that every block should go a little bit better with every other block, which is why you'll notice that some changes just kind of make sense. However, some changes change things entirely. Like when you look at the melon, for instance, although it's still recognizably the same melon, or rather watermelon, that it was before, you can see how, like, oh yeah, the melon has a much more distinct texture. The way it kind of merges with other ones is much better than before, and it really creates a brand new interesting block. Whereas previously, you probably wouldn't have a build of melons, unless you're me, and I've actually done that, but you probably never built of melons before. Now you might consider doing that. The pumpkin is in a similar kind of batch where, like, although you might not build with this necessarily, it looks much better from the side angles, and from the top it looks a bit more realistic in my opinion, and you just start to see like tiny changes like this one, and it's like, oh yeah, that does add up. But it's not just the nature in Minecraft, which is where most people spot it first, that has changed. It's a lot of other things. So again, looking at all the types of trees, you'll see the leaves, they've all changed. They have their own distinct patterns. The tree logs, they've all changed. The planks, they've all changed, as you saw with my house, but also the crafting materials are all going to change as well. So although the changes to things like stone slabs, for instance, aren't very noticeable, changes to stuff like stone bricks are very much noticeable. And this is where one of the great comparisons of, like, showing off every individual block is great, but showing off a lot of that block together, especially in a world surrounded by other stuff, is a much better comparison, because here is some stone brick. As you can see, by itself, it's like, oh yeah, it's stone brick, but when you start to really look at it, it's like, oh, that's very different. And when you look at a whole room full of this, you can very clearly see that, like, it has a different color profile. It fits differently, it's a more lighter area thing, and it fits, again, with the rest of Minecraft better, in my opinion. There is some work to be done with some of these things, but for the most part, you'll see how, like, oh yeah, and then there's stone. This looks different entirely too, but for the most part, it fits a bit better with underground materials. Not so well with, like, above ground stuff, like stone and stone slabs have never gone worse together, but you can see how, like, oh, that's a thing. Looking at the golden tea, like, oh, that's made from different stuff as well, and yeah, you can start to spot, just as we go around here, like, oh yeah, tiny changes all over the place. So, now let's talk about the fact that it's not just blocks that have changed. Everyone focuses on the blocks in this update, it's been the main thing, but it's not just the blocks that have changed, and let's go into the armory to talk about this one, while also showing you the glass, by the way, which doesn't tile very well, but does look very nice by itself, as well as the stone, which again I think can really make some much nicer looking above ground buildings if used correctly. But also you notice, looking at the walls here, stuff like these swords look entirely different. Look at this wooden sword over here, for instance, looks pretty different to before, because the icons are also changing as well. So all of these sprites, as they're called, because they're 2D things, have all going to be changing as well. So although the crossbow hasn't, because it's a 1.14/1.8 thing, you'll see Cooked beef, for instance, also known as steak, that's changed a lot. Looking at my inventory, you can see how like, oh yeah, paper's way different, gunpowder for instance, and there's a lot of items which will be changing not only their appearance in game, but also their appearance in your inventory. So just keep that in mind as we go forth here, and also look at these bookshelves and be like, yeah, interesting. As we move on to the next kind of key element, which is like, okay, so we've seen how like the natural stuff looks, we've seen how some of the crafted stuff looks, and we've even now seen a lot of the icons, and you can see, looking at a lot of them, they make sense. They're just much nicer, more rounded textures. Fireworks, for instance, look at these. They just look much, much better than they before. Same in my opinion with armor. Like the new armor, I feel like there's some people who don't like it, but I really like the new armor. I think it's a really, again, it's a much more clear, and again, fits with the rest of it. But look at the way, for instance, the fireworks fit with the armor, fit with the swords, fit with everything else. It has that same vague feel that connects them all together. At least that's what I see personally when I look at all these things. Again, I know a lot of people have their own personal opinions, but this is all my take on how the new textures fit with Minecraft, and in general, pretty well. However, when you get stuff like the Nether, you see some of the most drastic changes, because the Netherrack has changed substantially. If you're curious as to why it's changed so much, the old texture was only really there because it's always been Minecraft's Netherrack texture. No one likes the old Netherrack, and the reason it's been that way is because it was originally called Bloodstone, so it was like a take on cobblestone, but like a little bit more bloody, whereas now, because they've removed the limitation of like, oh yeah, it has to be based on cobblestone, even though it looks a little bit like cobblestone, you can see a lot like cobblestone, you might even say, you can see how it looks much, much better, and much more hell-like and demon-like. This looks like a weird kind of stone, but maybe not hell-like dimension, and I love the Nether in general for that, because although the Netherrack is the most noticeable version of this, and you know, Nether Quartz is another great example, you can see how even stuff like Soul Sand, again, like there's just small changes all over the place that make this look a lot better than it did previously, and I think Glowstone's another kind of like somewhat controversial, but pretty great looking one in my opinion, where you can look around it and say like, oh yeah, so the change has really made the Nether feel a bit more like a Nether as opposed to something else. And yeah, again, it's a change that's it's hard to be against in my opinion, because even though the Nether's changed its look entirely, the Nether was ugly before, and although it's ugly still now, it's less ugly and it's more interesting and fascinating, and it feels like it's made from something different, which to me is a big win, a big improvement. Maybe it's not for you, maybe it's just my taste prevailing through here in this kind of review, but as far as I can tell, the Nether is just a straight slam dunk improvement. Everything about the Nether, to me, just looks better. Like, everything that's changed, I should say, because again, not everything has changed yet. They might do something horrible to mess it up at some point, but for now, I like everything in here, and given my Nether also has a lot of natural materials, I like the way it contrasts here too. Like, again, you can see the contrast from the stone brick to the Netherrack, all really good stuff that I'm on board with. So let's go through the Nether portal, again, an unchanged texture for the most part, back to the overworld, so we can talk about some of the bits over here, because I wanted to talk more about icons, because icons are really, really great when you talk about them in like the individual form. Like this apple, it's hard to like the old apple more in my opinion. This firework, hard to like the old firework more. Anything in this inventory, I think it's hard to like the old version more. However, when we shifted over to say a chest of items, you can see how you're immediately overwhelmed, because one of the big problems with switching all the textures at once, like they're going to be doing, is it means that sometimes it's just tricky to see what's what. So stuff like rotten potatoes or poisonous potatoes, it's like, oh, that, I guess that is vaguely potato-like. When you look at stuff like the gold nuggets or stuff like the map, there's a lot of icons that your brain just can't immediately tell, and when you have a lot of these together, as you will in survival, it's going to be tricky to adjust. So I would say sort your stuff ahead of this update. If you're scared of it, if you're concerned about this update, I would say sort your chests a lot better, because if, like me, you just have a mess of chests, it gets really tricky really fast working out exactly what's what. And if that's a problem for you, if you're scared of that, if you look at my chest and you say they're awfully organized, then that's just something you might want to vaguely keep in mind. So, yeah, again, looking around anywhere, you can see the same thing's kind of true. Looking around the ender chest, you can see how, like, it's even true here. Although the Totem of Undying is my favorite cute little update in this. Like, look, it's a way cute little totem in my opinion. But let's now look at the farms, because, again, the natural world, I showed you a brief overview of, like, what a default Minecraft world will look like. But you'll notice how, like, in this world, we have a lot more than just the default Minecraft textures. So, first of all, I have to mention, anything from 1.14, 1.8 onwards will be the new textures by default. Even 1.13 is designed the same way. This is only stuff made pre-2018, before they hired Jasper, just keep that in mind. But when we look at the farms over here, for instance, you can see how the potatoes, quite hugely different. The carrots, pretty hugely different. I wouldn't say quite as much as potatoes, but like, the farm ingredients have changed a lot. Like, there is so much of a change from here versus the old ones, and you really kind of have to keep that in perspective as we go forwards here. They're like, oh, yeah, farm has changed a lot. There's different, like, some areas of Minecraft are very unchanged, but some areas have changed a lot, and one of those is farming. It's going to look very, very different. It's the same mechanics. Again, nothing has changed with the actual game itself, but when you look at this, it feels like something has. It feels like Minecraft is an entirely different game, but again, it's not. It's the same game, which is kind of astounding in its own little way. Also, again, we can't go into, you know, my Let's Play world and use this as the standard without using, of course, the sugarcane farm. How does the sugarcane farm look? And as far as I can tell, it's like near identical. It's not enough to aggravate me. It's like, okay, that's still sugarcane. That's still good in my hood. In fact, this might even be the same texture. It's like, it's that kind of close in my opinion. So, yeah, basically, we're going to use this now just as a kind of last kind of roundup because there's two more things I think that are worth showing off because there are two places you might spend time that we haven't mentioned already. But before we can show off either of those two, I have to mention, in case you're like, man, Toy Cat, you said you built melons earlier, but I don't believe you. I do actually have a melon house. And again, I think the melon house has been significantly improved in this update. Before it was just this quirky thing I did because I had a bunch of melons. I was like, you know what? I need a melon house because melons are great. But in this update, it's changed significantly. It looks like a weird, like almost like a stained clay, you know, like one of the dyed terracottas, the stained terracotta, you know, hardened terracotta, the weird patterned ones. It looks like that a bit, but no, this is melons. Melons are now a valid material, which is kind of fun, and you'll see that for a few different blocks in this update that, you know, previously you might not have ever wanted to use, but now they're really great. Look at the mushroom stalks, for instance. I know these are tricky to get, but look at these. Ooh, that's improved a little bit. The mushroom block, which previously was arguably one of the most ugly blocks in the game, like this texture right here, improved a little bit. There's a lot of tiny things that you never even think about looking at, and maybe if it weren't for this video, you wouldn't look at for ages, that have seriously improved. And I think the biggest example, you know, we can't go this far in the video without addressing it, it's going to have to be the, you know, the big elephant in the room, the big monster that no one wants to be here, but it's always here regardless, because gravel has changed in this update too. That's right, gravel has a new texture, and here's the crazy thing about gravel, it's actually improved. I never thought I would say anything positive about gravel, so, you know, let's now take that back and just say, you know, improved with an asterisk. But gravel is better than it was before because it's not horrifically awful. However, it has to be mentioned that it's like suspiciously like the concrete powders, and in general, I would say like, you know, it's not. I don't think I could see any amazing use for it, but it is worth saying there is gravel that is now potentially usable in some places. And for me, that is the highest praise I can sing for gravel. That is literally the same as if I'd just fallen in love with a girl and I'm singing songs about her and serenading her. That's the closest thing we can get to a Minecraft block, because again, gravel was so bad before that to get to like almost usable, to get to pretty much concrete powder is a serious upgrade in my opinion. So looking at the ground, I just have to mention this because it's the stone you mentioned before, but mixed with dirt and gravel and ores in a way you might not have seen before. So you'll see when you look around this, like, oh yeah, underground, it looks mostly the same, besides a few certain places. I mean, obsidian being one of them, but like, besides a few certain places, like, okay. So, you know, like the mossy cobblestone, that like looks way more, it looks like it's designed for above ground. It feels a bit weirder below ground, and admittedly it's being used a lot more above ground in the 1.14 update. But you can see, look around the rest of this stuff, like, okay, so for instance, you know, like redstone ore, like, oh yeah, so the stone's changed. The redstone itself still has that weird face on it, but like, for the most part, underground is going to feel familiar. It's going to feel a bit like you're playing in a texture pack for some people though, because if you spend your time underground, there's 2 or 3 textures you're running into, and they're going to be changing in this update. So it's kind of a weird one on that level. But again, you should get used to it fairly quickly. It just has to be noted that underground does have a slight different feel to it that might throw you up at first, because stone is hard to notice fully. Like, it's like, oh yeah, it's like basically the same, but a bit more like, you know, rubbed to the side, I guess. But eventually you will start to note it more and more. And in case that's the sort of thing that drives you crazy, maybe it's worth downloading the textures now to give them a try. Because before we go to the last place, which is going to be the end, I want to kind of mention that, one, this update is coming soon. Although you can use the old textures, I would recommend not avoiding it, but instead giving it a full try. Eventually you can go back to the old ones, but it's always not a great idea to be like, you know, I'm not even going to try the new thing, I'm just going to keep my old one. Obviously, you know, it's an option you always have, it's something you can always do, I can't take that away from you. You know, I'm a voice on the internet in a little box in a video that you can immediately X out of. Look how wonderful that is. But the thing is, I'm saying this now, not because I want to influence your decision and make you use new textures, but because there's going to be a lot of things you miss when using the new textures. The new textures are great because they balance everything in Minecraft together, make it all look better, and also it's what everyone else is going to be playing. You can use the old textures in the same way you can use any texture pack right now, but the old textures are going to be just that. They're going to be a texture pack that's going to be some great nostalgia. It's going to be fun to look at, but all textures going forwards are built for the default, and yeah, you can't really expect anything more than that. I would say it's an idea you can take if you're the sort of person who thinks oh yeah, it'd be cool to have my own exclusive texture pack, that'd be fine. But if this sort of person who looks at this and goes, man, I just don't want new textures, I would say give them a try, because the more I use them, the more certain things grow on me. At first, it's shocking, but now I love the Nether. Every time I go through here, it's like, ooh, what a pleasant journey this is. I really love the Netherrack in this one. It feels like like the bloodstone that it was originally meant to be. Again, it looks a bit like a cobblestone filled with blood, but without looking horrific. I didn't know that was possible before just now. And there's just so many different areas where it's like, yeah, this feels like this. Look at an abandoned mineshaft, for instance. Look at a stronghold, or look at a stronghold in an abandoned mineshaft, perhaps. And you can see that, oh yeah, this is a whole thing. That is a thing. Everything is wildly different, and that's interesting. It's different. It's unique. But eventually, I think it will feel like normal. Everything is designed to fit together in a way that I really like. Look at this door, for instance. It fits with the iron door. It fits with everything else. And yeah, we've got 3 more blocks to show off, and that is the 3 main blocks you'll find in the end. Because one of the places you might spend a lot of time, especially if you're looking for elytras, or if you just, I don't know, maybe you just like looking for loot this way, because it's one of the more effective ways to get diamonds, arguably. But then at the end is filled with 3 main blocks. You're going to find a lot of endstone, you're going to find a lot of obsidian, and you're going to find a lot of bedrock. So we should talk about all 3 of these blocks, even though I believe bedrock is using a slightly older version of it. So bedrock, I mean, you shouldn't be looking at it too much, if we're being honest, but you will find it about the place. What do I think of bedrock? So bedrock looks like this. Again, I don't believe this is the new texture, but the new texture, assuming we're talking about the one that has been updated, is a smooth version of this one right here. It's like they took bedrock and they smoothed it down a bit to make it fit better with other bedrocks. If you're a creative player, that might matter to you. But if you're in survival, it's like, okay, there's slightly less distinct blocks of bedrock, but it shouldn't be a huge thing. But in my opinion, it's like, okay, your bedrock's going to have a slight downgrade. But when it comes to endstone, again, you can see the same thing's true. Where it used to have to be cobblestone, but inverted, because that's how they designed endstone. Again, Notch was more of a programmer than an artist. Endstone is now its whole distinct block with its distinct feeling. It feels a lot like we're on the moon right now. Like, look at the sky, look at the endstone. But, we're not on the moon, we're in the end. And then the other block is obsidian. So obsidian has to be referenced here because you get giant, towers of obsidian. Maybe, like me, you want to destroy these giant towers. And maybe, like me, you have a giant shulker box filled with this obsidian you want to put away. But, basically, yeah, looking around, you can see how obsidian's everywhere. You're going to have to destroy it. What does it look like? Different. Different is the easiest first word, but to go more into it, looking at like a wall of it like this, it doesn't look, it looks like this alien material. It looks like this is a weird wall on an alien planet. Again, we're on the moon and this is an alien base that they've made right there. However, when you start to dig into it a bit more, yeah, you get it, because I'm digging these things, but when you start digging them a bit more, you can see how oh yeah, but it's distinct. It's separate to all the other stone blocks, and it's meant to show this is the serious block. This is the hardest block to mine in survival. Again, that's not bedrock, that's not the other unbreakable blocks. This is one of the hardest blocks to mine, and it's it shows off that intimidation in its bizarre alien look. It doesn't necessarily fit what obsidian's meant to be in real life, which is a really fragile glass, but did the old obsidian texture do that? No, it's more the function thing, and given obsidian's this fantasy material that doesn't need to match its real life one, I think it fits quite well. Oh, it's a fancy hard material made from alien goop, because does anything need to make sense? It's Minecraft. And that's really where I want to kind of end today's point, that although there's going to be a lot of texture changes, you might think make the game more cartoony, or less cartoony, or more realistic, or less realistic, and the truth is people are going to have those exact same opinions about different... Oh, okay, so the glitch everyone has had where you spawn 200 blocks in the sky just happened to me right now. I don't know what causes that, but that's scary if you don't have an elytra, I guess. But basically, looking around this update, you can see how, yeah, there's going to be a lot of blocks to hate for different reasons, but I think when you really start to dive into it, there's a much more unified look going on that you can start to appreciate if you look for it. And yeah, that's where I want to end today's video, that this is unified, it makes a lot of sense, and it's actually a solid appearance for Minecraft, in my opinion. If you did enjoy the video, you can let me know though, because it helps out the channel a lot. Let us know you do like seeing these sorts of videos on this sort of thing. Again, I said I'd do a texture pack review because I really wanted to talk about all of the blocks in one big place, and I feel like every other review always looks at individual blocks, but fails to realize that, you find sand in a desert with lots of other sand. You find, gold blocks usually by themselves, not with a sea of other gold blocks. Every block has a context around it. And I hope that today's video showed that off a little bit better than maybe anything else you've seen out there. If it did, I hope you do enjoy this video. Maybe leave a like on it, share if you really liked it, and make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on if you want to see videos like this every single day on your homepage. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I guess I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.